Okay, now we are going to talk about parallel and perpendicular lines. So, if I had two lines, I'll call this one in blue Y1, and I'll call this one in red Y2. These two lines would be parallel if their slopes were the same, but they had different y-intercepts. Notice that they would cross the y-axis in two different places, but my slope would be the same. My rise over run, the steepness of my stairs, as I create my stairs, would be exactly the same. Now, if the y-intercept and the slope were the same, then they would be the same exact line. So parallel lines are lines that have the same exact slope. Perpendicular lines, if I call this line Y1 and this line Y2, perpendicular lines are lines that cross at a 90-degree angle. So this would be 90 degrees when they cross. So it makes a perfect X. Okay, now for perpendicular lines, notice that the slopes of these two lines have opposite signs. The blue line, Y1, is going up left to right, so that has a positive slope. And the red line is going down left to right, so that has a negative slope. So with perpendicular lines, they have opposite signs. But then they also have slopes that are reciprocals. So, for example, if Y1 had the slope, I'll color code it in blue. If Y1 had the slope positive 2/3, then Y2 would have the slope, I'll make that in red so that's coordinated with Y2. It would have to be a negative 3/2, for example, because you take the reciprocal and the signs are opposite. Now, not all lines have to be either parallel or perpendicular. There are lines that are neither. But just so that you're aware of the conditions in which you need to be parallel and perpendicular, these are the conditions. To be parallel, the slopes have to be the same with different y-intercepts. In perpendicular lines, the slopes have to be opposite signs and reciprocals of each other. Okay, so in the first example, it gives us two lines, two equations of lines, and it's asking to determine whether they're parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So what we need to do is put each line in y equals mx plus b form so that we can identify the slope and the y-intercept, and then from that we'll be able to determine whether they're parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So for line 1, we have 6y plus 5x is equal to 3. So I need to put this in y equals mx plus b form so that I can identify my slope and my y-intercept, which means I have to isolate my y. So if I want to isolate my y, I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides. And then to isolate my y, I'm going to divide both sides by 6. Three over 6 would be 1/2, so I'll just leave it as 1/2. Okay, so my slope is negative 5/6, and my b, or my y-intercept, is 1/2. Okay, so now let's look at the second line. So we have negative 12y is equal to 10x plus 11. I'm going to put this in slope-intercept form so I can identify my m and my b. So in order to do that, I have to divide both sides by negative 12. And then I can reduce that. Negative 10 over 12 is minus 5 over 6. Okay, so now I can identify my slope for this line is minus 5, 6, and my y-intercept is negative 11 over 12. Notice that my slopes are the same, and my y-intercepts are different. That is the case where we have parallel lines. Okay. Next example, we have 2 points that form a line, and it's asking if these 2 points that form a line are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So it's the same situation. We want to find the slopes and compare them. Okay, let's see. For line 1, my slope is going to be the change in y over the change in x. So I'm going to call this x1, y1, x2, y2. So I'm going to take 48 minus a negative 42, and all divided by 8 minus a negative 10. Watch those double negatives. I'm subtracting a negative, so eventually it's going to be positive. So I have a 48 plus a 42, that's going to give me a 90. And then I have 8 minus a negative 10, that's going to give me a plus 10. So that's going to give me a positive 18 down here. And when I divide, I get a slope of 5. Okay, for line 2, I'm going to take the change in y over change in x again. So I have negative 61 minus a negative 45. And that's going to be all over 7 minus 5. Okay, when I take negative 61 plus 45, that gives me a negative 16. 7 minus 5 is 2, so that gives me a negative 8. These two slopes are neither the same, nor are they opposite signs and reciprocals. They're definitely opposite signs, but they're not reciprocals of each other. So these two lines are not parallel and not perpendicular. They're neither. It doesn't fit either category. In example 3, it says write an equation for the line parallel to f of x is equal to negative 5x minus 5, and it passes through the point 4, negative 15. So if we want the line that we're trying to find to be parallel to the given line, we want the slopes to be the same. And since the slope of the given line is negative 5, we want the slope of the line that we're going to create to be negative 5. We also want our line to pass through the point for negative 15. So this is the information that's given to us to form a line. So I'm going to use point slope form. Because this is not the y-intercept that's given to us, so I can't plug it into y equals mx plus b form. I have to plug it into point slope form instead. So I'm going to plug in my y1 is negative 15. That's going to give me a double negative, though, to make it a 15, positive. And then my slope is negative 5. And then I have x minus 4. So this is my point slope form. Now, if I wanted to continue and do a little extra work, I can put this in slope intercept form by distributing that negative 5 and subtracting 15 from both sides. Let's do that for practice. So I would distribute the negative 5. That would give me a minus 5x plus 20, and then I would subtract 15 from both sides. So when I combine the 20 and the negative 15, I would get y is equal to negative 5x plus 5. So this is going to be my slope-intercept form. Okay, next problem says write an equation for the line that's perpendicular to the given line, and it passes through the point -4, -5. Well, since we want it to be perpendicular to this given line, I want the slope to be the negative reciprocal of -4. So the negative reciprocal of -4, so I change my sign, so that would be +4, and then I flip it upside down, that would be 1/4. So I want my slope of the line that we're trying to find to be +1/4. And that is because, again, it's perpendicular to this line, and this line has a slope of -4. We want it to pass through the point -4, -5. Since this is not the y-intercept, and I know that because it's not the value of y when x is 0, I'm going to use point slope form. So I have y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. I'm going to plug in my slope, and I'm going to plug in my x1 and my y1. Because my x1 is negative, and because my y1 is negative, I'm going to get two double negatives. It's going to end up being a positive for both of those. So I'm going to have y plus 5 is equal to 1/4 times x plus 4. So this is point slope form. Now, if I want to take it further for practice, in order to put it in slope-intercept form, I have to distribute that 1/4, which would be 1/4 x plus 1, and subtract 5. When I subtract 5, that gives me a -4 on the right-hand side. So this would be my slope-intercept form. So the slopes of parallel lines will be the same, and the slopes of perpendicular lines will be opposite signs and reciprocals of each other.